It is my pleasure to introduce to you a very sterling individual in the landscape not only of Trinidad and Tobago, but certainly in the Caribbean region. He's one of Caribbean's most prominent businessmen and a founding director of the Arthur Lockjack Graduate School of Business. He is the chairman of Associated Brands Industries Limited and one of the largest privately owned operations in the region, employing more than 1,500 persons, and sits on several other boards of public and private companies. He is the winner of the Ernst & Young Master Entrepreneur 2001, the University of the West Indies Caribbean Luminaries Award 2002, the University of the West Indies Honorary Doctorate 2002, and the recipient of the Shikonia Gold Medal in August 2004. Join me as we invite the esteemed Mr. Arthur Lockjack on stage along with Professor Carillo for a one-on-one discussion with Mr. Lockjack. Put your hands together.
For giving us your Saturday, which, you know, it's a very special time. These are very turbulent times for this generation. I was just sharing with them what a week we had in the financial markets. So, someone like you who's actually immersed in the world, how can you describe our current context from the economic perspective and social perspective, and what do you see the implications of this complex environment for this new generation going forward?
Well, first of all, let me say good morning to everybody. Thank you very much, actually, for that warm welcome. Thanks for the nice words that were said. And, well, you're right, Miguel, we do live in some very turbulent times, especially what is happening right now in the world, where we've seen. There's a phrase that people like to use, and people like to use, you know, we're doing this by best practice. And the question is, what is best practice? And usually best practice used to mean that you take a scan and you see what certain people are doing and certain corporations, you know, the governance issues and everything, and how things were governed and all of that, both from a corporate point of view, political point of view, etc. But we've seen within the last, I would say, 3 years, the crash of a lot of major institutions around the world that we used to look up to and say, they practice best practice. And so it opens the whole question of what is best practice and who do you follow. Difficult at this point in time to put your finger on that. And because we've seen biggest banks in the world, the biggest financial institutions, we've seen the US up to a couple of days ago, you know, in turmoil, actually can't get together within the Congress to decide actually whether to raise the debt ceiling and how they're going to pay, the US going to pay their bills. Next month's salaries could not be paid until they came to a thing. So basically we've seen this kind of complexity almost get into the stage of moving from crisis almost into chaos. And one has to understand how to navigate those waters and so on. And I want to come back to one thing, and I think we all know what is wrong and right. And I think what you have to do is to be very careful in your thinking, think through the issues, not necessarily group think, but your mind. That's what you were born with, that's what the good Lord gave you, and that's what you're going to die by yourself with. So basically it's yours. Probe, ask questions, and I think actually seek on your own benefit, for your own benefit, and utilizing your own brain as to what direction you want to take, and do it within an ethical framework. Actually, it seemed to me that over the years, people have come to believe that if I do something and get away with it, I'm smart. And so on. And I think that kind of thinking, we have to go back to the old-time ethical behavior of trying to know if it's wrong or is it right. And I think that's very important, Miguel. So you have to question, actually, what is so-called best practice, in my view. Again, I mean, for instance, if everybody followed the big airlines of the world, then there wouldn't be a low-cost airline existing. And we all know that low-cost airlines came in big time into this. So the low-cost airlines, or the no-frills airlines, or the JetBlues and the Ryanairs of this world, they didn't follow best practice. They came up with their own model and was very disruptive to the industry. But they succeeded and forced the major airlines to become much more efficient. So I think you have examples of that around the world, and I think that's what I like to. Maybe I could stop here now. And
what do you think will be? We'll talk about kind of questioning the best practices, but what do you think should be now, especially for professionals living in the context of the Caribbean, the next practices, not the best, but the next practices that they should actually try to develop themselves and look forward? The next one.
Well, it all depends on what your ambition. I think, again, we have to think in terms of a person. And you have to do your own introspection and retrospection to a point, and decide what is your ambition, and what are your goals, and what do you want to achieve. And it's something that you have to decide upon. And how bad do you want it? Are you going to be, you have to be passionate about it. You have to have a lot of energy and be energetic and passionate about what you want to become, what you want to do. And anybody can do it, and anybody can become a success in what you set out to do. The problem is you have to invest in it, and how you invest your time, how you invest your resources in it. And that brings about the question of risk, actually. Very important question of risk, actually, in respect of how you want to go through. What are you risking? Are you risking your family life if you go to school, if you work hard, if you try to do things? Are you risking too much if you were to try to go into your own business and utilize your savings? Actually, these are all questions that one has to ask for oneself in respect of what you want to do. And whatever you want to do going forward, whether it's professional, whether it's to be an entrepreneur, whether it is to be a top-class executive in a corporation, or whatever your thing is. I'm talking in a business context because we're in the business school, actually. Whatever you want to do in that context, I think you have to move very rapidly, very fast. Time is of the essence. And you can shorten that time by really putting a lot into it. So it's how much you want to sacrifice in your own life to be able to become what you want to become. I tell people, that there is, for instance, at the graduation ceremony, some years ago, when the university gave me the honorary doctorate, I had to speak to over, I think maybe about 1,500 or 2,000 graduates of the university from all disciplines: law, history, medicine, this and that, law and business and engineering, etc. They're all going to leave with a degree. They all studied hard. But if I fast forwarded 10 years, some people will be a lot more successful than others. yet they all started with the same degree, same everything, going out at that point in time. What is the plus factor? What is the plus factor why people who have been fortunate enough to be able to have the wherewithal to be able to go to university? I never went to one, but people who can go to university, go to business schools or engineering schools, come out of there with your degree. And from that point, what differentiates one person from another? And again, that's a question, in my view, Miguel, that people have to think about, actually, in that respect. And whilst it had a lot to do with you yourself, I'm worldly enough to know that not all times you make your own opportunity. It has to do with quite a bit. And I would use the word luck. Where you are, what position you find yourself in, what made you be in that point at that time when an opportunity came and you struck it or whatever have you. But it's the insight in seeing that there is an opportunity, because the Chinese have a saying, I can't say it in Chinese, but some people see, some people look. Major difference, actually. And I think that from that point, you have to, again, decide how you're going to move once you get an opportunity, once you see something, and you can also create your own opportunities, don't get me wrong. But by and large, people ask me, but what is the mergers and acquisition strategy of Neil and Massey or Guardian Holdings, or the companies I chair? And I say, well, we have a strategy, yes. And the strategy is to get into this business and do that and do the other. Many of the acquisitions we make have been opportunistic. Actually, it is not necessarily of our own making. We didn't strategize to do that. But it came along the way, and from time to come, but you have to be able to see it for when it comes and to be able to do what it is. So I think that it has to do actually with your own personal investment in what you want to become, having decided that, and how hard you're going to work on it. Because what makes one person more successful than the other, there must be a difference in what that is. And usually that is hard work also, but I want to say it does have some luck in it, actually. And I think if anybody tells you actually that they became a success because of their own doing solely, I think that person is suffering from hubris, actually. I think a lot of other things involved, abstracts.
Sir, is a leader made or born?
I think both. I would think that some people, by their very nature, some people tend to be, I've seen it, they tend to be more or less a born leader. You can say a born leader as such. But I would think the majority of people that I know have become leaders by virtue of their circumstances and by virtue of the difficulties that they have found themselves in, and having overcome those difficulties and so on. And I think that the whole aspect of leadership, motivating people, getting people together, leading them into something as distinct from operational management, which is something that's highly focused, looking at issues or problems, or whether it's accounting, whether it's engineering, whether it's whatever it is. That's fine. But there are people who have that extra plus factor, who have confidence in themselves. And I want to make a distinction between a person having confidence in themselves and acting confidently or acting arrogantly. I think that, again, these are very thing, but I think, what gives them confidence, and what would give you confidence is knowledge. And that's why education is so important. I think poverty is not being educated. If you're educated and you're poor, then I believe that something is wrong with you. because you can't have education and be poor. Yeah. You have to go and put that to work. But when you talk about if people who have come through the ranks and so on have knowledge, that gives them confidence. And with confidence, that gives them a certain aura that they can lead and they can bring people together, motivate people to do certain things. They are not too bashful. Actually, they're not too much behind the scenes, or even if that's their style, they may not talk a lot. But when some people, I mean, I see it in boardrooms all the time, you have directors who talk a lot, and you have some directors who don't talk very often. But when they do say something, everybody listens, and so on. So it's a matter of style also, but I think it is knowledge, the energy and passion for doing what you have to do. The ability, and also there's another abstract ability, but it's not so abstract. It's been, I would say the word is thoughtful. I think if you understand and if you look forward into the future, a couple of days down in the future, you can anticipate some of the things that are going to happen. And if you anticipate what's going to happen by an action you do, then accordingly you can prepare for that when it happens. Some people do not, and some people may resolve and solve the issue. But if somebody anticipates the problem coming and they move to nullify it or neutralize it, then the problem does not arise at all. And that's what I would call a bit of anticipatory management. And that we need to do that. And those are attributes that people gravitate to, because people say, Miguel is resolved that problem or very easily, or Miguel didn't have the problem. But it wasn't that Miguel didn't have the problem. Miguel understood the problem was coming, and he moved early enough to avert it. And people take a look at that, and they say, well, this guy is somebody who had a fairly good track record, and I should follow him. And especially put together with the passion, the energy, and all the other qualities that go, that person becomes a very strong leader.
So what you're talking about is that foresight is really a craft.
I don't know if it's a craft. I think it's, I wouldn't say, I think one should think about it, and one should, I mean, if I write a letter, if I'm going to write a very difficult letter or an important letter, I have to understand how the person who's receiving the letter is going to read that letter. And I have to understand, when by the time I'm sending that letter off, what is his reaction going to be. So from that point, I am prepared for it. And if I don't like if when I write the letter, I'm not too, when I do that exercise, I find that the person is going to come back in a certain manner that I don't want him to, then I would redraft the letter. But all that is anticipating. So many times we do something and then something happens and we say we should have done this or could have done that or whatever have you like that. And I think it's very careful in avoiding mistakes that you do a little bit of anticipatory management, because every action has a reaction.
Now, instead of looking forward, let's try to do some backward looking. After all these years of being a leader and entrepreneur in the region, what has been the 3 most important lessons that you've learned?
That's very difficult to be. I've learned so many. I would say one of the big areas, and we've seen it happen, is the assessment of risk. Entrepreneurship is taking risk. but is the assessment of risk. If you're going to cross a road, you have to make a quick assessment of the risk. Whatever you do in life is risk. But if you do it often enough, it becomes the norm, and so on. Fine. But in business going forward, I think the most important thing, in my view, is assessing risk. And I'll put it this way. And risk is directly related to some people's, or persons, or some corporations, or whoever it is, or whatever institution it is, the ability to have what is the level of your risk appetite. If I have $100 in my pocket and I have to risk 10, maybe not a big deal. But if I have $100 in my pocket, am I going to risk 50? Then the question is, it's a big deal. And how do you assess that risk? And one of the things that I think is always, you must always do, is have a plan B. Have a contingency plan that if you do decide, after weighing up all the risks, that you do want to do something, have a plan B, that at some stage that you can exit what you're going in for, rather than it take you down the tubes with it. So I think one has to be very careful when one is taking risk in business. Whether it's a corporation putting out a new product, whether it's in making a big investment in a new technology, whether it is you have to change your job tomorrow and go from one job to another one. Whatever the risk is, you have to be very thoughtful about how you take it. That doesn't necessarily mean that you become risk averse. Don't get me wrong. The last thing anybody could say about me is being risk averse. But generally speaking, you have to be able to say that I assess this risk, I have a downside, and so on. People come to me and say, well, I mean, should I take this? What do you think, Arthur? I mean, I have this opportunity. Should I take it and so on? I say, what are you going to lose? They say, well, I have a job that pays me $30,000 a month. I say, well, okay, fine. I say, okay, so what are you going to lose? I say, well, I might lose my job. I say, okay, and if what you're going to do doesn't work, what then? And the problems, I say, why any problems? Why don't you think you get another job? Can't you get one for at least $25,000? Why is it so bad? Why is it doomsday? I mean, if you had a job at $30,000 a month and you can't go and get a job some other place for at least $25,000, then the person who is employing you really need to have their head examined. But you have ability, confidence. You see that comes back to the confidence aspect of it. And confidence is a funny thing. It depends on your upbringing. It depends on how you are brought up to a large extent. It's one of those abstract qualities that I think but it is knowledge-based. The more knowledge you have, you should have the more confidence. Unless, of course, you have a lot of baggage carrying from your life before. And we all have that. So the problem is you have to get over that. And you have to get over those fears. Have confidence in yourself that you can move forward and better yourself. Other than that, you're going to stay right there in a position. And yes, you're going to get a little increase every year or whatever have you, or a little growth and so on. But you're not good. So you talk about this. I hear you talk about disruption.
Yeah.
Well, that is also something that a person has to do. Not only a corporation. You have to disrupt yourself. That's all.
Well, Mr. Lejak, thank you very much for your words, and I think that very, very inspiring. And please, let's give an applause to Mr. Lejak. Thank you, sir.